We're going to start out with a quiz. What's in the bag? No.
Salt.
How do you know it's salt?
It's this.
Because you went to Sunday school this morning?
Well, no, I did not. I had my own.
What is that? Everybody recognizes it, right?
Morton's.
It's Morton salt, right? It is common. I'll bet if I went to every one of your houses, I could find something just like this. Matter of fact, probably the exact same thing, wouldn't I? Maybe bigger. No?
I'm buying generic right now.
You buy generic? Okay. So some of you may have generic. Some of you may not have Morton. What do you guys use this for? Seasoning? Taste? What other things is this good for?
Ice.
Ice cream? No. That's say ice cream and ice is this salt. That's this salt right here. You guys know what kind of salt this is? Rock salt. Can you eat this? No, you should not eat this one in particular. You know why? Because this isn't pure rock salt. This is ice melt. And the little blue pellets in it probably aren't real healthy for you. But it does a great job on ice. Throughout history, what could we have used this for? What did they use it for? Cleaning wounds.
They used it for money.
For money. Very good. Somebody saw the slides this morning during Sunday school. What else? Keeping witches away? Oh, I hadn't thought of that one. Preservative? Yeah. Without... Yeah? So, we have all sorts of uses for this, right? And it's extremely common. I need to tell you, everybody has some of this, or a variety of it at their house or in their barn right now. All of us do. You want to know what the interesting part about it is? Our passage today, when Jesus talks about this stuff, we think, so what? He's talking about salt. Big deal. Because it's very common. However, in the time of Christ, and up until recent mining, this was very rare. It was so rare that it was used, like you said, as salary. And that's how we get the term, salary, for a Roman soldier. It's also how we get that saying, he's worth his salt, he's worth his pay. I mean, think about it. Something that is so common today used to be money back in the day. And by back in the day, I mean a long time ago. So, salt is a preservative. Salt is used for healing, internally and externally, because if you have a cold, what do you like to eat? Chicken noodle soup. And it's not the chicken noodle soup, it's the high salt content in chicken noodle soup that helps you out. If you have salt and you get it in a cut, it hurts, but it also helps heal it up by drying it out and getting rid of bacteria. You've talked about using it for footing, if it's slippery. But salt also has a different property to it. Another thing that it does. How many of you have ever seen the cab corners on a Chevy pickup? What happens to the rocker panels and corner panels on a Chevy cab? They rust like crazy. And Chevy's because it's a Chevy? It has nothing to do with the salt. It's all about the Chevy. Okay. It's just because it has a bow tie on the front of it. Because Fords and Dodges never rust. Those trucks always stay pretty. Maybe it's because they don't do as much work. How's that? But either way, what will salt do to steel? It'll eat right through it, won't it? Can you drink seawater? No. It'll kill you. You drink enough of it, you'll get really sick. So how is it something that is good for us can also make us extremely sick? Because we overdo it. So when we think of salt, we think, so what? Big deal. It has a lot of things. We use it for stuff, but it is so common that it's just not that important. So when we read Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out, trampled under people's feet. And often we will read into verses 14 through 16, and people will combine salt and light, and they'll compare them and do that. But we're going to not do that today because salt has an important message for us in this. And while there are so many different varieties of salt, and so many different ways we can use it, and so many different ways it was used, to us, when we read this, it's kind of common. It's just, Jesus is talking about salt. No big deal. We have it all over the place. But in his time, it wasn't all over the place. They did not have mining operations like what we have now, where if you've ever seen pictures of it, it's just huge, vast miles and miles and miles of tunnels that they poured out to pour salt, because it is such a precious thing. If we think of salt as a preservative, we humans have always used it as a preservative. You can always, throughout the centuries, salt has been used to slow the decay of meats, vegetables, and a variety of other things. Matter of fact, salt was used in mummification to slow that decay as well. So the properties of salt slow decay. And we understand that. We've seen mummies. We've tasted meat that's been seasoned and preserved with salt. So we understand it. But do you suppose there might be a deeper meaning to it? Maybe when Christ was talking about how the effect of salt has on what it's placed with or on, do you think that maybe he was talking about us having more to do with society than what maybe we do? When we consider that we're God's children here on earth and Jesus is calling us salt, and if we recall what we learned through the Beatitudes about how we're to preserve righteousness, preserve purity, and righteousness means to be morally right, then what Christ is talking here about us as a preservative, being that salt, is that we are the ones charged with preserving morality, righteousness, and purity. But if saltiness loses its, how will it be restored? See, there's also, in that preservation, a potential for loss, or a potential for ineffectiveness. And if we become ineffective, how will moral decay be stopped? If the church is not salty, who's going to hold up the standards of righteousness, of moral conduct, of character, if Christ isn't in us and we aren't being that salt? Do a quick comparison. How many of you have ever been to a place where Christ is shut, completely pushed out? Could be a place of work, could be a school, could be a friend's home, could be anything like that, where there is no representation of faith in Jesus at all. Have you ever noticed the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm a member of a certain organization that they pray to God and they say the Lord's Prayer and they use God as the term loosely, for treatment of trying to change their lives, but they're afraid to dip their toe in the water because then they might like it, then they have to jump in.
Right.
But I'm glad they have folks that they do, which is, I felt it when I was there, but I also tend to think that a lot of people use loosely and think that they're always forgiven because they got it.
Right. In those places where Christianity isn't, and there is no salt, say in particular towns, in particular locations, in particular businesses, places, is there a higher rate or higher instances of violence and perversion? Mm-hmm. Is there?
Yes.
So, without salty Christians there to preserve morality and righteousness, what happens? Violence, perversion, moral decay. There is no preservative there. What about salt as a healing properties or product? Have you ever noticed something? What happens to people's attitudes, language, and behavior when they find out that you're a Christian? Ooh, it changes, doesn't it?
Yep.
Changes in one of two ways. They put on a fake front and try to be nice. Their language cleans up, and they pretend to be more proper than what they really are. Or the second one, the ooh, they lash out. How many of you have ever had, we're going to relate this to something really common. How many of you have ever had a paper cut? How many of you have ever had chips and salsa with a paper cut and got that salsa or the salt off the chips in that paper cut? How many of you have ever intentionally put salt on a cut to get it to heal up? If you've done it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a burn and a sting that makes you go, Is the salt necessary to help? Yes, it is. Does the salt come with an effect? Yes, it does. People will respond to that burn that a salty Christian provides in one of two ways. They will take the sting because they know the sting is worth the healing, or they will rebel against it. And that's how we see two different responses for two people. Some of them fake it, and some of them lash out. And the ones that lash out really don't want their sin wound, healed. They enjoy having the wound. They enjoy being the victim. They enjoy the sin way too much. Like chicken noodle soup, that can of chicken noodle soup will do you no good sitting in your cupboard shelf if you have a cold. You have to take it out, open it up, and consume it to relieve. The salt does no good setting in the cupboard when you have a wound that needs healed. This is what Jesus is talking about. Salt must be used, and we must be salty. Otherwise, if we don't apply the salt to the decaying meat, it's going to continue to decay and rot. If there is no application of saltiness, then the decay continues, and the perversion, the violence, and all this stuff continues to go on. Is the salt welcome? Not always, because we know that the salt is going to hurt. Salt used for footing. Now, a lot of times people who are of a free will persuasion will press free will into this. And they will say that a person will lose its saltiness, they've lost their salvation, and they're good for nothing, and they're good for nothing. They don't continue to read on, they don't do any research. And they try to use this passage to say you can lose your salvation. So you guys know that I am of free will, and actually kind of something in the middle, to be honest. And it's often, this last half of the verse is taken as a negative. And Christ does state it in the negative. But, how many of you have ever walked on ice? How many of you can walk on ice as well as you walk on dry pavement? No. We all have to do the penguin walk. And the older I get, the more penguin walk I have to do because I used to be able to just run right across it. How many of you use salt to clear your sidewalks or your driveways and stuff like that off? We all do. Or maybe we don't, we just do the penguin walk, whatever the case may be. That salt still has to be applied to the situation to make a difference. And in this case, it has to be applied to give someone footing. I spread salt on my sidewalks. I'm not going to walk every square inch of my sidewalk. You all know where I live. There's going to be a lot of people walk all along my sidewalk. I am really trying not hard to not cough into that mic. But every time I get enough air in there, it just rattles that goo around. Maybe I need to eat some salt. Okay. Last year, no, year before, you guys knew I was training for a half marathon and completed a half marathon. How many of you I got really sick during that training period? Many did. I was sick enough I thought I was having a heart attack. Things weren't right. I mean, I was out of sorts. I could feel my heart just pounding. I mean, you could actually see it move in my chest, through my shirt. I had gallons of water with me, it seems like I drank while I was out there for that 13.1 miles. And it was hot, and I was sweating. So I just kept pouring the water on, pouring the water on, pouring the water on. But what I ended up doing was flushing all the electrolytes out of my body. Now I drink electrolyte water with electrolytes in it, because I learned a lesson. Without that proper balance of electrolytes, which is salt, potassium, magnesium, some of the other enzymes, we have a tendency to get off balance. Things don't work right in our life. And at that point, things weren't working right biologically for me. Once I got enough salt in my body, I'll tell you something right now, I ate a ginormous steak that day. French fries, and I mean, it was huge. And I just woofed it down. I poured tons of A1 on it. I didn't know I was out of salt. I actually, from all those years of smoking, thought I was having a heart attack. But Mindy babysat me, and I mean, my lips turned blue. I mean, I was stroking or having a heart attack. But it really wasn't. That's what it seemed like. I was lacking something. And it was making me ill. You see, the world is ill. And it's lacking something. And that something that it's lacking is salt. Christ in this passage, you are the salt of the earth. He's telling us that for sure footing, that to restore decay, to restore equilibrium, to restore and help with those healing properties, we are to be that salt. And we need to ask ourselves, am I useful in the Lord to prevent and preserve? Preserve the situation, prevent moral decay from slipping and going further. Can the Lord use me to heal a wound? Not necessarily a physical wound, because I don't have any sort of medical degree or anything like that, but maybe a spiritual wound or an emotional wound. Can the Lord use me to do that? Can the Lord, if necessary, use me to give someone else sure footing? Help walk them through this life. Jesus makes it pretty clear here that we are that salt. And because of him in us, we then have those same properties in us as he had in him, to be able to do all of these sort of things. Why isn't it happening? Are we effective in the situations that God puts us in? I dare say that many of us would be able to say, not always. If we want to do better, we need to start with the very first thing that we always start with, and that's pray. Pray for God to make us salt. And then pray that he would use us to have that impact, that same sort of preservative impact, that healing impact on those around us. And then be willing to do what he calls us to do. An illustration I used in the Sunday school class, I think I used Lynn. Lord, Lynn needs some money. He's struggling financially. I pray that you would use Stephen Keith to help him, but not me. And he's hungry. He needs food. Lord, I pray that Wanda would cook him lunch. Maybe Alan could cook him lunch. Maybe throw something on the grill for him. I call it Moses syndrome. Because you remember Moses at the burning bush? Said, Lord, here am I, but send Aaron. We need to be ready to be used. How he wants to use us. In the manner he wants to use us. Because here am I, send someone else isn't acceptable. It wasn't acceptable for Moses, and it's not acceptable for us. And Lord, here's how I think you should solve the world's problems. Here's my agenda. Follow it. It wasn't acceptable for Moses, and it's not acceptable for us. I don't know about y'all, but there's been many times the Lord gave me a direction, and I decided to go the other way like Jonah, and I ended up messed up. Or I decided to do partially the what he wanted and partially what I wanted. If you guys have ever done that, you know what happens there too. You still end up messed up. So after we've prayed, ask God to use us, we need to be available. You don't have to be amazing, just available to do what he's asked us to do. And that's how salt will preserve society. Without us being salt, society will not be preserved. And the first place we need to be salt is at home. Because the way and the direction the home goes, that's the way society goes, and that's the way the nation goes. So we must be salty there first. Let's pray. Lord, it's not always easy hearing and understanding your tougher things, the things that you called us to do. It's easier for us to say, no, don't do that, and to stay away from it. But Lord, you gave us so many things that we should be doing. We shouldn't just be sitting around doing nothing. And it's not always easy, Lord. And we're not always received well. But we know that you weren't received well also. We also know the abuse you took for being salted. So Lord, if you can take it and survive and triumph, then we have no doubt and no fear that we too can take it, survive, and triumph. So Lord, I pray that you continue to use us to have that salty impact on those around us. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all will stand for our